Hey, how is everybody? Welcome to video number 0.4, number 2. I am your host, Neil Parfit, and this video is for more advanced users and experienced users alike that have recently updated to 0.4 OS, which was unleashed into the wild late August. And I'm sorry I'm late for creating a video, but here it is. This video is going to basically outline, for me anyway, the 5 most important updates to the OS. And hats off to Brian, because you think everything's awesome and what else could you need in this module? And then all of a sudden he releases all this cool stuff and now I don't know how I'd live without it. So let's take a look and see what these things are. So just to demonstrate some of these new features, I'm just going to create a really simple synth. So I'm going to use just a sine wave oscillator. I'll just add one now. So I got my sine wave. I'm going to assign my volt per octave from a KB37, which is on a number 2, it looks like. You can notice that this is slightly different now. We're going to stick to jacks, which is basically telling us, hey, I want to patch from a physical port. So I want to use a number 2. So this stuff is all the same. Back out of there. I'm also going to add a ADSR to my level control. So I'm going to go into that subchain. My gate is on A1. Just going to add that in there. And then in turn, I'm going to have that trigger an ADSR unit. So there it is. And I'll just turn up the release, up the decay, and just got to make sure we have gain applied to our VCA level. Oop, you can hear it clipping there. That's fine. I'll do 0.7 just so we have a little bit. So we have a very simple setup here. And here's the first new feature that I love. So now under modes, we have a scope mode. And we've never seen anything like this before. And here it is. So I'm going to hit down on scope. Before, I believe this showed us the CPU meter, but I've already forgotten because this is so cool as a replacement. So here we go. If I flip the thing or the switch down to scope, now we have this bird's eye view of whatever we have set up in our chain. So check this out. We got our sine oscillator unit. We have a list of all the parameters that that unit has. And then if there's any assignments, we see them. So right here, I can see that A2 is assigned to my volt per octave. We can now also see, if we just use our encoder, we can just skim around. We can also see that under the level parameter for the sine wave oscillator, we have an ADSR unit in its subchain, and the input of that is a number 2. And it sort of dynamically figures this out on the fly, no matter how much stuff you have in here. So even if you have a whole bunch of units, and I'll just show you, I'll just exit out of here. Maybe I'll add a reverb. I mean, it's not going to sound that great on a sine wave, but I just want to just show you how this automatically just sort of updates itself. I'm going to add a reverb. Maybe after that, because I'm feeling kind of weird, I'll add a delay. Let me find it. I think I just passed it. Here we go. I'll add a delay, tweak this, and maybe I want the wet-dry balance to be controlled by my modulation wheel, which is on a number 3, so I'll patch that. And maybe my feedback control, I want controlled by another sine wave, so I'll put a slow one in there. Really slow. I mean, I know this is sort of a silly process, but just to show you. So now I have all this extra stuff happening and loaded up. Now if I go to scope, check it out. It's immediately repopulated this scope with all the additional units and assignments I've just made. And this can be, as complex as you want. It's going to show you the whole thing, which is fantastic. And my favorite part about this mode is, no matter where you skim to, let's say I skim to that delay, feedback control, sine waves, level parameter. If I have my cursor sitting on that and I flip back to edit, it's going to take me right there. So it's an immediate way to jump around. Whereas before, if you had subchains that were like 2 or 5 or 8 levels deep, you'd have to sort of navigate around manually, and eventually you'd just sort of forget where you were. With this, I can hit scope and I can be like, you know what? I want to go right to the phase parameter of my sine wave oscillator. Boom, there I am. It's immediate and I love it. It's literally my favorite feature I never knew I needed. So, number 2 of new features being rolled in. Before, let's say we were adjusting this wet parameter here. Before, you'd have to sort of dial in exactly what you wanted if it was a specific number by like adjusting fine and coarse. Now, if you're ever adjusting the bias or the gain of anything, if you hit the soft key right below it, it takes us to a very large numeric entry screen. And with this, it's really easy to dial in numbers. So now maybe I want my wet dry parameter to be 0.561. So I can immediately hit the soft key below the number and just dial it in. And it's that quick. I hit enter and there we go. I can go back. This is where it gets kind of fun. You can be like, you know what? Maybe I want it to be something else. You can, maybe I just want it to be 0.5. I could literally have 0.5 selected and I can go 0 right side and it will just wipe out everything else to zeros. Done. On other parameters, it gets even more interesting because I can go in here, I can actually, let's say I like that number, but maybe I want it to be 3.9. I can literally just hit this grab decimal point, I can hold down this S3 button, and I can just move the decimal place to where I want it to go. Let go, and there it is. Not all parameters will take, obviously. It depends on the kind of parameters you're working with, but you just have to keep an eye on that depending on what it is. So that's number 2, a new way of numeric entry for parameters. So again, if I wanted my size to be 0.7 exactly, I can just highlight under or press the S key underneath bias and just dial it in. And it's just that quick. No finagling. But you know what? Sometimes it is good to just you know, hear what this is doing in relation to a patch as you're working. But sometimes you need precise numbers, especially with like VCAs and stuff like that. Or if you're dialing in frequencies for an oscillator, as an example. So that was number 2. Number 3, and this is pretty cool. I've been waiting for something like this for a while. Let's say we have this sine wave oscillator volt per octave control here, and I just don't want it to be this higher range. Maybe I just want it to go plus and minus 1200 for 1 octave plus or minus. So what we can do now is if we go into the sine wave oscillator's header, to the menus, we can go edit controls. I can choose that, and now I can actually hard assign my lowest and highest visible range that that fader will control. So if I go to here, press it, notice the same screen that we had before for numeric entry. We can use that here. So 1 octave is 1200 cents, and I want the top to be, maybe I want the top to be 2 octaves high instead of 1. So I can go 2400 cents, and I'll hit enter to commit those. I'll hit enter again to get out of this. And check it out. Now our range goes from minus 1200 to 2400 cents. So really cool. You can now sort of set a lowest point and a maximum sort of visual ceiling for these parameters. So you can tailor them to what you need for the patch at hand. So another interesting thing that's happened recently, and I think this is more in the spirit of custom controls, you can actually create new controls on an existing unit. So let's say I have this sine wave patch, and I'm just going to set up something here. So I'm going to go into my volt per octave. I'm going to add a mixer here. Just bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to add a mixer. Oh, where'd it go? I passed it. Mixer channel. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call it LFO, just so I know what this mixer's for. Within it, I'm going to add another sine wave. So I have this sine wave oscillator I'm going to use as an LFO. I've set the frequency to 0 hertz, and I'm just going to go into that speed subchain, and I'm going to assign A3, which is the modulation wheel on this KB37. And sorry, I just hit my camera there. That's okay. I'm going to get out of there. I'm going to up this gain. These gain values are already too high, and even at that fine point, it's a little bit too much, and I'll show you. If I up my level, take a listen to this. So this is actually a good spot to, whoa. Okay. Hey, I'm doing a video here. Back off. I can actually go in here and use that numeric entry and be like, you know what? I want the maximum value to be 14. So that's good for me. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zero out this VCA. And now I'm going to show you what I'm up to. Googie, I'm trying to do a video here. Beat it. Okay, so the fourth thing I wanted to show you is you can create new controls within a custom or within a regular unit. And check this out. So we're back at my initial sine wave oscillator, and I'm going to add a control on this level to turn up or down that. Okay, I think I need to stop this video. Oh, would you be quiet, please? Be quiet, please. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this header. I'm going to go edit controls, and notice, sort of like when we were dealing with custom units before, those custom unit controls, we have the same sort of idea here. So at the end, I'm just going to add one here. I'm going to go insert gain bias control. And this is a new screen we've never seen before. First thing you got to do when you're in here is make sure this side of the screen is in focus. So just press any M key on this side, and notice that there's a highlighted sort of box around it now. Basically, the idea is that this fader here is sort of a dummy fader to show you what all these parameters are going to look like once you've set them. So in my case, I'm going to go name. I'm going to call this LFO level. Wow, my cat is so noisy today. Okay. I'll just call it LFO L, and then I know that's the LFO's level. I want the minimum range to be 0, so I'll do that. And maybe I want the maximum range to be, I know I'm dealing with a VCA, so I'm going to just guess here. I'm going to say 0.15. And again, you can tweak this all later. I'm just sort of arbitrarily picking numbers I kind of remember. You can pick coarse and fine steps depending on how you want to be able to adjust this fader. Here's the fine steps. I can choose a suffix, such as frequency or time or gain. And also if you press an M key again, so none of them are highlighted, it just won't show anything. Keep in mind that this is only a label, so don't confuse yourself by adding a millisecond indicator to a gain control or something like that. Just keep in mind that kind of thing. This is just a housekeeping labeling thing. You can choose the number of visible digits if you want to, less clutter on your screen. I could be like, when I only want 2, maybe I just want 1 decimal place. It's really up to you. And gain properties down on the subscreen. Maybe I don't want the minus controls, so I'll just put that at 0. And you know what? Max gain, maybe I only want it to be 0.2 in this case. I mean, you can dial in whatever number you want, but in my case here, I'm just going to set it like that, just to make it easy. What else we have? And then we have super coarse and super fine. So if you're setting a super coarse or a super fine adjustment, all that is if you're adjusting with fine or coarse mode, if you hold down Shift, you'll even get a more drastic adjustment if you're in super coarse, or a more minute adjustment if you're in super fine mode. So you have those 4 additional ways to adjust this value beyond just turning the knob normally. So if everything's to your liking and you can sort of play with this fader here to make sure everything's cool, hit enter. If you hit up, you'll lose your changes, so make sure you hit enter. And then we'll be back here. We'll see our controls just as before, and I'm just going to hit enter one more time just to take us back. And here we are. So now we have this LFO level fader here, just like in a custom control, in a custom unit, which is really cool because this is just a regular sine wave oscillator and we've added our own control to this. So now we can take this and control that VCA on a completely different subchain. So let's do that now. I'm going to go back into, actually, see, I was just about to do it the old way. I was going to navigate in there and find the exact parameter I wanted. But let's use that scope mode. I want to basically go into scope. Let's look and see what we have. So there's our sine wave. There's our volt per octave with the LFO mixer. We have a sine wave oscillator within it. And I basically want to assign that fader to this level parameter here. So I can jump right there. I can just go back to edit mode and we're there. I think there needs to be a little bit of an update there, but that's the idea. So I want that control on the Paramos level to control this level fader. And here we go. Oops, I think I double tapped there. Let's go back. So level, subchain, input assignment. So instead of these jacks, I'm gonna hit locals now. And check it out. We have the exact same sort of scope editor as before, but now we're gonna use this to actually grab the parameter we want to tap from. So I basically wanna tap from that LFO level control that I made. So I just have to highlight it with that little cursor, hit enter, and boom, it's there. If I, just to show you again, I'll clear that. I can go back to locals, and you basically just take that little cursor thingy and point it to whatever you want to grab. If it's a subchain, you just highlight over the subchain. If you want the signal of this entire unit, you just highlight over the unit and press enter too. So there's tons of new opportunity for routing. And be careful because you can create feedback loops if you're not paying attention to your signal flow. In this case we won't because this is sort of point to point. We got our LFO level here. I'm gonna hit enter. And let's go back to our scope. And let's just double check a few things. I'm gonna go to our parentmost spot again, our sine wave oscillator. Here we are. See how much faster that is? I'm not like navigating up and down through subchains manually. I can just go, I want to go exactly here, and boom, there I am. So here it is, and let's just see. So nothing yet, because we missed one thing. So I'm gonna go to scope. I'm gonna go down to our level here. And let's just double check my gain settings, because I have a feeling I didn't add any gain. Yeah, that's... So let's do a 1-to-1 gain. And I'm just going to back out to the topmost level again. So that's the first part of it. And my LFO speed is currently set to 0. So it's just adding a static held CV position. So let's go back in. I'm going to go scope mode again. I'm going to skim down to our sine oscillator. Here's its frequency. Oh, and it looks like I have A3 assigned to it. So hold on. Oh, that's all it was. So you know what? Just as a precaution, I can say, you know what? Maybe I want this base frequency to be 1 instead of 0. And then that way, it will never just sit static on one CV point. It's pretty drastic. But there we go. We have an LFO control on this sine wave oscillator unit that we made ourselves. It's mine. And I didn't have to go through building a custom unit just to add that one control to this single unit process that I have happening. Kind of rad, actually. Kind of sounds spooky. sort of missed Halloween, but there it is. We got some Halloween happening. Another thing to note here is just like a custom control and a custom unit, this doesn't necessarily have to be static. I can actually go into the subchain of this control and add something to control that parameter. So why not just use an oscillator again, or a sine wave again, just for fun. I'll just set this kind of slow, and I'll up my gain a little bit. Now this is a bipolar signal, so I could go in here and offset this just so we get the full range of the wave. And you know what, maybe instead of 0.1, I'm gonna move that decimal place, and actually, you know what? I think I have to go here and do that. That's what I want. There we go. Beautiful. So, you know, I'm listening to this. I'm like, you know what? To be more spooky, I want to add a slew limiter. So I'm just going to go to scope. I'm going to zoom right to my volt per octave subchain right here. I'm going to undo the scope and go back to edit. And I'm just going to add a slew limiter right there. And now we've added a whole bunch of things, so let's go to scope mode and see what we have going on. See, look how much more complex our setup is now. But we can look at it really quickly and skim around. Really simple. And this brings us to stuff you couldn't do before. Like, let's say I want the sine waves output to also adjust the feedback on the same process. So we could do that. I don't know what it would sound like, but we can. I could be like, you know what? I want the output of the sine wave to control this feedback. So I'm going to go to the subchain. I'm going to go to our locals patch, and I'm just going to highlight over this entire thing and hit enter. And there we go. Now we have its output controlling its own feedback. I mean, it's sort of a useless assignment, but you can see where this can get powerful if you're dealing with effects and multiple oscillators and all that kind of thing. So there you go. Number one, the new scope navigation system. Number two, the new numeric entry for gain and bias settings. Number three, being able to edit the control ranges. Number four, creating new controls on existing units. And number five, this extensive local patching system based on the same scope navigation that, man, my cat is so loud today, based on the same navigation as our normal scope. And instead of, you know, just skimming around to look at stuff, you can actually pinpoint exactly what you want and tap off a signal from that position. So really, really powerful. And I wish there was CV control for my cat. Maybe that's in OS 0.5. I don't know. All right, take it easy. See ya.